Four quick examples that underscore this. A trade agreement that represents 40% of the global economy. A potential climate accord that will require contributions from every nation. A nuclear agreement involving Iran, which the President mentioned. And 6 very different global powers that came together to help achieve it. And a counterterrorism coalition of more than 65 members, nations all, that carries with it the hopes of good and decent people everywhere. Each of these initiatives is distinct in purpose, but each requires both American leadership and the strong support of partners and friends. Each is a product of principle and pragmatism, embodying both what we should do and what we can do. And each will have an impact that extends beyond the headlines of the day. First, the arena of international economics and trade. Earlier this month, our negotiators finished work on one of the most significant trade agreements in history, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP as it's referred to. This is a big deal, literally, encompassing countries all around the Pacific Rim. And why should you care? Why does it matter to Indiana and every other state in the country? Well, Indiana is not exactly a Pacific state, but focus on the fact that Indiana's 3 leading trade partners are Canada, Mexico, and Japan, and all of them are part of TPP. So Indiana's exports, which are already at $35 billion, will likely increase under this agreement. And it isn't just big corporations that are going to benefit. More than 4,600 Indiana companies export to TPP countries. And some 80% of those firms are small or medium-sized firms. In fact, Indiana exports support more than 187,000 jobs across our country. Now, we should remember that 19 out of 20 of the world's consumers live beyond the borders of the United States of America. You're not going to grow if you just sell to yourself. You can't just sell to yourself. And in a marketplace, a free market, which we believe in, that's obviously antithetical to everything we believe in. If we are going to keep building our prosperity, and we must, we have to keep opening and expanding overseas markets. That's pretty simple math. So the TPP is definitively a plus economically. But it's more than just another trade agreement. It is a genuine breakthrough in bringing disparate nations together to raise the international standards of labor and environmental norms. It is a struggle. This is a struggle really that goes back to the dawn of the industrial age, when union organizers and muckrakers argued that profits not be wrung from the sweat of exploited and underage workers. And the reformers said that the global trade ought to be something more than a competition to see which country could pay its workers the least and trash the environment the most. And they said we ought to aim higher than that. Well, guess what? It's exactly what we did. Let me be clear. The TPP is not your parents' or your grandparents' trade agreement. This is something new. Consider that every participant in the TPP has to comply with core environmental and labor standards. Every member has to refrain from using underage workers and unsafe workplaces. Everyone has to ensure that state-owned companies compete fairly with those that are privately owned. Everyone has to fight trade-related bribery and corruption. Everyone has to respect intellectual property. And everyone has to keep the promises that they make, because those promises are clearly enforceable within this agreement. Now, I know there are some who hear all of this and say they still don't want any part of it. They may still yearn for the good old days when many, if not most people, worked in one job in one town for their entire careers. I sympathize. I, too, have affection for the past because that's where I grew up. But it's not where I live now, and it's not where any of us are headed. Last week, I saw a letter in the New York Times written by a gentleman from right here, Bloomington. And he wrote that Congress should both reject the TPP and, I quote, rethink globalization. Rethink globalization? Now just how are you going to do that? The most powerful country or person on the planet can't stop globalization. Globalization is driven not only by technology, but it is driven also by the aspirations of people around the world for an opportunity, for a better life. The truth is that globalization doesn't come with a reverse gear or an emergency brake. 1,000 different factors drive the jobs market, and the process of adapting to it can be very painful. But it just doesn't do any good to deny reality. Now, what does make sense, my friends, and it does, is to mitigate globalization's downside. It is to tame the worst instincts of unbridled capitalism and to have the kind of standards and regulations mutually arrived at that protect people against abuse and exploitation. It is also to make sure that we give every young person the chance to go to college by making an all-out commitment to lifelong learning, by providing support for entrepreneurs, by investing in infrastructure, and by backing institutions like the Exim Bank that help American firms to compete more effectively all around the globe. That is why the Obama administration is leading in each and every one of those areas I just listed. And despite concerns about globalization, polls show that most Americans view foreign trade as an opportunity, not a threat. And here's the reason. You know, you've all seen those duty-free stores at the airports, right? Well, America is pretty much one big duty-free shop. 70% of U.S. imports cross our borders tariff-free. But that's not the case with all of our trading partners. In fact, America's exporters face a wide range of high tariffs in many TPP countries. And that's why we have so much to gain from a deal that will eliminate over 18,000 foreign taxes on made-in-America products. A deal that will help our manufacturers, our farmers, and small business people to compete and win in fast-growing markets all around the globe. And what is more, the TPP matters for reasons far beyond trade. The Asia-Pacific includes 3 of the globe's 4 most populous countries and its 3 largest economies. Going forward, that region is going to have a huge say in shaping international rules of the road, on the internet, financial regulation, maritime security, the environment, many other areas of direct concern to the United States of America, to each and every one of you. And remember that in our era, economic and security issues overlap, as I mentioned. You can't lead one and lag on the other. By voting for this trade agreement, Congress can reinforce the message that the United States is and will remain a leading force for prosperity and security throughout the Asia-Pacific. And that will be welcome news for our allies and friends, a huge boost for stability in the region, an important step vital to our own well-being, and really good news for companies and workers here in America's Midwest.